So, as the dust has finally settled on India's victory, we're going back into the World Cup. Apologies to our Pakistan fans for revising some of the horrific memories of Pakistan's performance. But it's about time we did this. A postmortem of Pakistan's debacle, not just at the T20 World Cup, but also it's been something that's been happening for a while and what needs to change, at least in our rather humble and unprofessional opinion. Try and be a bit more truthful and then, not be politically correct to the extent that we can without being banned, because, all the powers that be watch us. But I've got Moin here with me. I think when you've got like a whole chart sheet to go through, so maybe we just go through it one by one. I've got a few points to make as well. But why don't you kick us off with the problem that is Pakistan cricket? Not the problem with Pakistan cricket, but I think the whole thing is such a problem.
Yeah, honestly, we were just discussing off air just before we started, that the great thing about Pakistan cricket is there's no right answer. They're all wrong answers. They're all wrong. It's just which one is less wrong than the others. That's just the answer. That's how I've approached it, right? And we did this sort of post-mortem post the 2023 World Cup. And I was actually watching that video a while back. And I said, it was, we still believed after that tournament that Pakistan still had the makings of a good team, and it was just a bit of bad form, a bit of, you know, a few niggles here and there that just meant we didn't succeed. But now I think it's clear, it's blindingly obvious that the system is broken. It's accentuated by constant shuffling at the top, whether it's the chairmanship, whether it's the chief selectors. We don't even have a chief selector, I have to say, or the board of selectors, whether it's the
Isn't the
team
chief
manager,
selector
whether
the
it's this.
same as isn't the chief selector the same as your senior manager
Yeah, I was going to say a
slash
new senior
sports
manager that doesn't
minister?
exist. So explain to me what a manager is, a senior manager, and a director is. Please tell me. I mean, I'm like this is almost starting to sound like a big four hierarchy. Partner, director, senior manager, manager. I mean, what's below it? I don't know. Associate. But anyways, look, the point is simple. We are here to just talk and just give our honest opinions. Okay, and I thought the first place to start is leadership. Now, typically, and this is the approach that Pakistan's taken, and for good reason, you pick your 11, the 11 best players, and you choose your captain out of that. We've tried that unsuccessfully for the last 5 years. Okay. Usually, I would agree with that approach. But I think in Pakistan's case, it has to be a very nuanced answer here, because unfortunately, with the lack of grooming that the cricket board provides to its players, captaincy is almost like a skill worthy of being selected for. And I personally think we need a captain. We need somebody who understands the game, and it's not just captaining on the field. It is somebody who can instill a certain way of thinking, a certain form of intent, and someone who can actually adapt and be like a sponge and evolve with the game. That's where Babar Azam and a lot of the others have been found wanting. Right? Yes, okay, we talk about Babar Azam's decisions on the field, but for me, it also just is quite alarming that he's around all these great players. Yes, he doesn't play the IPL, he plays a lot of other leagues. Why isn't he picking up these things that good captains do? So you know where I'm going with this, and I know it's going to be quite controversial, but with the groupings in the team that have emerged, with Shaheen, Rizwan, and Babar, I know Rizwan is your natural captain if you keep the groupings aside, because he's done the best in the PSL as captain. He's a wicket keeper gives you control of the game. They're often good appointees. But here, because there are groupings in the team between your three top players, I think you have to set a real sort of, just send a real message, which is nobody is bigger than the game and nobody is bigger than the country. And if all three are actually involved in grouping of some sort, none of them should be made captain. It's a clean slate from like the next series onwards, and that should be applied across formats. So Babar, Rizwan, and Shaheen do not captain. Okay, because if you give one favoritism, it's just gonna create further grouping issues.
Yeah.
And I think Shan Masood is your obvious candidate because he captains the test team and he did a very good job captaining the test team. Forget the result. But despite his resources, it was the most competitive series in Australia that I've ever seen, which is a credit to him as captain. Whatever, he was innovative, he was aggressive, he was creative, and I think he's a good leader of men. And it won't be easy for him to have a completely new person who doesn't even make the 11 otherwise or hasn't up to date in limited overs suddenly be installed as captain. So that has its own flaws. I'm not oblivious to those, but I think it requires careful handling, and it's a lesser wrong than appointing one of the three existing sort of powerful players as captain. I think there's a lot of benefit there.
Shan Masood, look, it just makes me feel a little uncomfortable in the limited overs format. Look, he is the obvious thing that critics will say, oh, making captain because he speaks good English. I don't think that's just the criteria. I mean, yes, he is probably a bit more, professionally educated or all those things, but that shouldn't come into it for a captaincy. But he does think about the game more than the others. I mean, even if you listen to his, press conferences, whether it's in English or in Urdu, he at least understands the game. A lot of these players, regardless of language, even if they're speaking in their own languages, you ask them, how did you bowl? What did you do? They just keep saying the same thing. The management gave me a plan and I just executed the plan. No one really says, this is what I was thinking. The ball was swinging. I thought I'd bowl it, pitch it up, I'll bowl length. None of them, like someone like, again, unfair comparison, but if you hear someone like a Boomer talking or a Kohli talking, they explain the situation, how they were thinking, what they were saying. Babar Azam again in his press conferences, we've made a mockery of it by him mentioning partnerships and blaming the bowlers every time. But it's the same script again and again, right? So it's not a case of education mainly. It's more a sense of game sense and game awareness.
Right,
And Shan
absolutely.
Masood has that. And I think he showed that again. Maybe that natural talent is missing from his game, but he's shown that in Australia where he at least tried to change his style of play. Right? He probably doesn't have the skill to play all those shots, but at least he was making an effort, which again, to his credit, means a lot. And he's done pretty decently in the county, season, even in the T20
Yeah,
format, surprisingly, along with Joe Root of all people.
yeah,
But but
but
yeah, that's probably not the benchmark. But at least he's doing something, and he tries to do something different. He tries to play the ram shot and this that, which shows that he understands and he's thinking. So I think there's a very strong case for that. The only other alternative is Fakhar Zaman in the white ball format because he's the only neutral person you have in the team. And but the problem actually is, I think we'll get onto this as well. I think his performance in the T20 World Cup is not being said or talked about enough because of the failures of the others. But he had a horrendous T20 World Cup. And again, okay, he tries to play those innovative shots, but some of his shots were pretty rash in that tournament. And he
yeah, and I'm
failed
glad you mentioned
in
that. Right,
every innings,
everybody
right?
says
So that's the other thing. So does he make it in the team on its own? Although I agree, there are probably other people who've just done worse, who don't deserve to be there as well.
so.
So there is that debate.
Look, Fakhar Zaman, I'm glad you brought that up. Look, the reason why he's escaped criticism is because his intent was there, and the bar is so low in Pakistan batting that all you need is trying to hit a big shot, and you're safe from criticism, right? So I completely agree with you. I think he definitely does merit a team. For me, I think his role, and we come on to talk about clarity of roles, which is another point in the on my chart sheet. But I think his role is very important in the short term when it comes to batting because he's the only player who is even remotely close to the modern era, and I wouldn't want to burden that with captaincy. That's the other
Yeah.
point in my head. And somebody who hasn't really ever captained, right? At least Shan Masood is captained domestically. He's captained he captains the Test team. There's a track record there. Fakhar Zaman is, and the issue with the current cycles is you're never in a non-World Cup year. You're either in a World Cup year or Champions Trophy year or T20 ODI, whatever. So
Yeah.
I just think anyone who becomes captain needs to have some sort of experience in the domestic circuit because there isn't much time to learn on the job before the next big tournament. So that's why. And look, with Shan Masood, there are just three quick things I'll just mention before we move on to the next point. The first is The way he got Steve Smith out, the way he got David Warner out, there's so many examples I can give you where he changed the tempo of the game through his creative thinking with depleted bowling resources. So tick there. Two, I don't care about his English and Urdu. I honestly don't care. I personally think people should have translators. Babar and others should speak in their local language and have translators when needed for English. For me, it's nothing to do with that. But it's just the fact that he he understands the game, as you mentioned, and also if you just noticed in the county circuit, he had the presence of mind to know that when there was an instance where he got
Yeah.
out, but when the ball hit the bat, it actually hit his helmet and then bounced to be caught,
Yeah.
and it was given out. But Shams was like, no, if it hits the helmet, the ball is immediately declared dead because there's a concussion risk. I mean, even umpires didn't know that at that time.
Yeah.
The two on the so I know it's a small example, but it's an example of
But he
somebody
still
who,
ran, which made no sense then. But anyways,
yeah, he did right. Yeah, he did.
I think he
He
just
did.
responded
Yes,
to root. He just responded to root's call or whatever. But anyways, I mean, I get your
but I
point.
think that was a is
He
that
kind of appealed his he appealed the decision against him, right? So
exactly.
yeah,
And
he had the sense.
the other point is he takes ownership. After the Zimbabwe loss in the World Cup 2 years ago, he in the press conference said, "I messed up. I should have stayed till the end." Right now, yes, he should have, but I also blame Shadab Khan for that
Yeah.
useless shot after hitting a six. I blame every other batter in the lineup. I blame Mohammad Wasim, who claimed to be an all-rounder at the time. But Shan Masood took ownership. He said, "No, I was the most set batter. I shouldn't have got out." I have never to this day heard Babar take that sort of ownership. And
Yeah.
I don't think language is a reason there.
Yeah.
But in any case, so that for me, I think Shan Masood, I think he can fit in the ODI format, certainly, and
Yeah.
that's the next priority given the Champions Trophy. T20 is, I know he was part of the squad in the T20 World Cup in 22, but the way the modern game is evolving, that is a bigger struggle for him. But
Yeah.
certainly, I think in the ODI format, either in place of Saud Shakil or Abdullah Shafiq, take your pick. I think there is merit in having him either in the middle order or in the opening, depending on where you choose to have him.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair call, and yeah, I think the ODI format there are obvious players that you could drop. To be honest, I mean, and this is the other thing, and maybe it's moving on to the next point, right? People say Babar and Rizwan are undroppable in the T20 format just because of how bad the rest of the team is. But if you flip that around, I think if you gave any of the other batters who've had a bad tournament, Fakhar Zaman, even Shan Masood, Iftikhar Ahmed, if you give them the same role that Babar and Rizwan have, the so-called top order anchor, they would do exactly the same that these guys have done.
Precisely,
Trust me.
precisely.
So I
Even
don't
Iftikhar, throw Iftikhar in that same bucket. If you, he
exactly.
can be an anchor as well. I agree.
So and then you ask the others to hit around while you take I have to say the easy way out of playing that anchors innings, which you haven't done very well in any case in this World Cup. Um, so I think there is also merit in the T20 format to drop him again, and have someone like Shan Masood who would do the same thing. He would give you the same results, maybe at a better strike rate. Maybe won't get the same runs, quantum of runs, but it will do it quicker, and he'll give you a 40 of 30 or 35 rather than give you a 45 or 44 or whatever Babar Azam's done. That's very harsh because again, he is a very Babar is a phenomenal player in ODIs. Again, ODI bilateral series, I think probably one of the best around. ICC tournaments, I'm not sure. But also the other thing is okay. I think this applies to every Pakistani batter from 1 to 5, maybe Fakhar Zaman as well, even Shan Masood, Babar Azam. But you look at the top 4 5 teams, right? India, Australia, England, South Africa. Would any of them have Babar Azam in their team? And if they would have him, who would have them in place of?
It's
I don't
completely
think
correct.
anyone.
None,
None of
none.
them.
I mean, the only one I would think in those is if you pick Babar instead of Makram at number three.
Or Riza
That's
Hendricks.
or Riza
Babar for Riza
Hendricks.
Hendricks. Yeah, that's maybe the only one, right? Maybe.
And that's also a big maybe because Hendricks has that extra gear which Barber. Look,
Yeah.
I know I agree with you. I think in T20 you can't have two anchors. I think look at a team like Australia who went in with no anchors, which yes perhaps didn't work for them, but at most one anchor. And look,
Yeah.
you have to make difficult decisions. And we said this at the start. If Babar doesn't succeed in this T20 World Cup, you have to make the harsh call of dropping Babar. Okay, and you pick Rizwan as your anchor out of the two. The reason I say that, and I know you can go either way, I personally prefer Babar's batting. So even I'm unhappy with what I've said.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, Rizwan would actually have a better chance of making it in a lot of these top five teams that you mentioned. Okay,
Yeah.
because I just think as a keeper and as somebody who has that extra gear, albeit with a more limited array of shots, he has that certain sort of oomph that Barber's play doesn't have when it comes to strike rates.
Yeah.
Again, I think it needs to be considered on a case by case basis. If Rizwan is constantly failing, if he's always trying to hit the one shot, he
Yeah.
that's his release shot, then Barber obviously
I mean, yeah,
has a
the
chance,
thing in
but only
Rizwan's
one.
favor, the thing in Rizwan's favor is that there is not enough depth and quality of wicket keepers as well, right? So Azam Khan, I think we've seen that, and I think that's done with.
Mhm.
Mohammad Haris, yes, as a batter could work, but his keeping is like way, way, way behind Rizwan.
Correct.
And then who else do you have? Usman Khan, but again, does he make it as a batter? He doesn't even keep. He is a keeper, but he doesn't keep in the PSL either because he plays in Rizwan's team. So you're really left with no real proper keeping backup options. So that's the other thing, and why you can back Rizwan and probably
And
keep him in the team. Although
and
he, in my opinion, was single-handedly responsible for that India loss. But
but
anyways,
I will say though, like I think he will get better. He look. It's the case with both Babar and Rizwan. I think they put pressure on each other. I know it's what I mean. What a fall from grace from being the most prolific opening pair. But you have to read between the lines here. And what you see is actually one puts pressure on the other. So when Rizwan feels he needs to be the aggressor because Babar takes his time, Rizwan does something silly, and vice versa. I think
yeah,
if you give Rizwan the role of anchor and say you need to bat till at least the 12th over or 13th over, whatever, you just have to stay in. And obviously, not at like a very low strike rate. Obviously, strike the ball at sort of your usual strike rate
yeah,
of 125, 130, but that's your job. I think that'll give him more clarity. At the moment, it's been a bit confused. He sometimes opens, he sometimes is with Barber, sometimes he's number three, sometimes he needs to be the aggressor if he replaces Sam and Sam
yeah,
gets out. Sometimes it's a bit unclear. So look, you pick one of the two, okay, Barber or Rizwan. Perhaps, as you say, with the keeping factor, and I think Rizwan is a sharper tool in the field as well. You pick Rizwan. If he
yeah,
fails, and he does look quite ordinary on challenging pitch conditions because he doesn't have the same array of
yeah,
shots, then Barber is there. But I don't think both make it into your 11. You know, and I'm not saying that the door is closed. What people need to understand is sometimes when you make a decision to drop someone, it forces them to evolve their game. It's the
yeah,
comfort that can sometimes be to the detriment of players, and it's for their own good sometimes. As harsh as that may sound, I mean, what
yeah,
a terrible thing to say. Oh, it is for his own good that he's fired.
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. So after everyone's done commenting on our English accents and how we don't know anything about cricket and how the Babar army is going to come and absolutely
yeah. I mean,
slaughter us, um, maybe have a think and step out of your little bubble and see what's happened in the last month or so to Pakistan cricket and beyond that. Actually, this team is now at the level of the likes of Canada and Ireland. Um,
yeah,
so if that's the level you want to
Bangladesh.
be at, then fine. We can keep stick with these guys, or if that's how you want to be, and that's the level that you want to aspire to be at. Fine. But I guess we could step back and move on to a few more broader points around professionalism.
Mental condition.
Understanding what it means, having meet and greets, and I don't know, some sessions of talking about lectures and stuff, talking about other things than cricket and having okay you can it makes sense maybe having like your immediate family, your spouse or children, joining you on tour. It's a long tour and stuff, fine, it makes sense. The Indian team also had that. But I mean, to have like your whole families, like your siblings and your parents and everybody coming in, it's like a family holiday to New York. It doesn't make
It is.
sense.
It
And
is.
we'll come on
Look,
to family holidays and maybe potential reasons around what's going on with the Pakistan A squad. But but I mean, doing like these meet and greets, we discussed in on our previous episode. But I mean, come on, you're playing a World Cup. You're not there on family vacation. Why are you doing it? It's yeah. I just don't get it. I know, people will say things like, oh, these guys are professionals and, they're like superstars and, they get all this recognition, blah, blah, blah. They don't get the kind of financial incentives or the rewards that people do get for playing in the IPL and all that. So they need to find other avenues to make money and so on. But I mean, you're at a World Cup. What are you doing?
yeah, I completely agree. And I think I take it one step further. There's professionalism and there's also mental conditioning, right? And
Mm.
that takes two forms. One is in terms of how you conduct yourself off the field, what you prioritize, what you don't. But that's also, you know, enhancing your decision making under pressure when you're at the crease, right? And I say at the crease, and I'm implying batting is a bigger issue when it comes to that. But even the bowling, the difference between batting and bowling is with batting, it's very easy to spot a mistake because you're out, right? You couldn't
Yeah,
hit the right shot, you got out, you felt the pressure.
yeah,
Bowling, the issue is they can keep coming back and bowl again and again and again. So it's not as clear. But I think the bowling is as guilty of not being able to make decisions under pressure. I mean, think of how, forget Bumrah. Okay, we've accepted that Bumrah is a class apart and he is from the gods. Okay, I've
yeah,
accepted that. Look at Ashdeep and Hardik. Look
yeah,
at their last 4 overs against South Africa. Forget the Pakistan game. Look at against South Africa on a good batting wicket. Imagine if Shaheen and Haris Rav bowled those last 2 overs each. We would, when they needed 26 of 26 with Klaassen and Miller on strike. Just take a moment to think about that. And the reason why you come up with a different answer is because they're not professionally and emotionally mature, right? They cannot make decisions under pressure.
yeah,
They either go for the magic ball, or if they get hit once, it scrambles their heads. They don't have
yeah,
a plan B. They can't think on their feet and they can't do basics right. They can't say, you know what, I'm not going to let my ego get in the way and actually just bowl at, you know, good stock line and length, your usual stock deliveries,
yeah,
and let the pitch do the rest, right? This ego, Haris and Shaheen both have big egos, right? This is unfortunately a problem with Pakistan and since the late 1980s, where everyone thinks from their egos and not from their own heads, right? There is no way Haris and Shaheen will ever go for a standard boring cross seam delivery when they're being hit, because when they're being hit they're like, oh, I want to get this batter out, right?
yeah,
Not realizing that the batter is probably expecting him to try and bowl a yorker length and hoping that he misses or he goes deep in his crease and whacks it, right? I mean, the little things like that I just feel our players, batters and bowlers, just don't possess. And that is a function of the Pakistan Cricket Board's inability to provide mental grooming and conditional courses. I mean, it's as
yeah,
simple as that. And I think that also segues quite nicely into grouping, right? I mean, the fact that you still suffer from groupings in the team after so many instances, you have Pakistan is a case study in sort of assessing the impact of groupings and a bad team culture on
yeah,
performance. I can give you so many. I mean, the fact that 90s team did not win so many ICC tournaments is a travesty, right? The fact that we had groupings left, right, and center in the '03 World Cup when we should have had one of our strongest teams was terrible, right? Players who wouldn't talk to each other. And
yeah,
like that's part of this whole thing, right? Because they need to understand that the team and the country come first and putting their differences aside for the greater good. And it's
yeah,
something that they don't quite have the ability to do. And Gary Kirsten, unfortunately, has his work cut out. He himself can't do that. I'm sorry to say.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be. I don't think this is what Gary Kirsten really signed up for. He's been good obviously in the past with India and everything, but in 2011 that was a very settled Indian team that had very senior players doing very well. I think he's very good at guiding teams through rather than going through this whole restructure and reform, which he really needs to do, changing the culture of the team. So that's something that I hope he can deal with. But I don't know if he's that type of person to take
Exactly.
people
He's not
take people on. I think he's very good at, if this was a '99 World Cup team, I think he'd be perfect with something like that, right? Where you have your superstars and you have a very good team and you just need some sort of guidance and helping you through that. But a team which needs to go through this revamp, I don't know.
completely
Who
agree with
knows? Um, but I mean, back to the point around professionalism and game awareness and look, I know it's a very it was an exceptional point in that match, the Surya Kumar catch, right? Nobody in that, well, let alone the Pakistan squad, but in all of Pakistan would take that catch at that specific
you. Correct.
moment, right? And it's not because Surya is a fantastic fielder or anything. I mean, it's that practice, that awareness, the fact that and they've done it time and again in the IPL, right? In even in the PSL, you hardly see any of the Pakistani players doing it. It's usually the foreign players that are taking catches like this. So it's just, and not having that awareness or that sense of ownership, um, to be like, okay, the game is evolving and I need to evolve myself, whether it's in the fielding or in the batting or in the bowling. They just have this, take everything for granted that, oh, we've got this national talent and we're going to bank on it. There's no sense of, oh, I need to evolve my game, or whether it's within the game as well, right? Whether you take again the USA game or even the India game, where no one really stood up and was like,
Mm.
I'm going to be the man today. I'm going to take responsibility and take us home. No one did that, right? Which is very disappointing in a way. Everyone was like, yeah, whatever, I'll try and hit out, or I'll just stick around, and if let's see, so if I get out, someone else will come and do it. That's really not the way that you should really approach
Or
these
India
things.
will help us do it, right? They'll bowl a
Or
few
there'll
bad
be,
balls, or there'll be a five wides or a free hit, and just hope that the free hit lands in your perfect arc where you've been practicing all day in the nets.
yeah.
It's never
Or
simple.
Bumrah will bowl you three full tosses and you hit them for six, which
Well,
actually happened.
well, he did.
Only the first
He
half,
actually didn't
exactly.
bowl as well against Pakistan as he did against South Africa. Fact,
Yeah,
he did.
yeah,
But
true. So yeah, look, I think that's part of the issue, right? It's just no real understanding of it. And again, if you talk about skill and talent, people have been questioning whether this team is actually that good. Yes, they're not the best in the world based on talent and skill, but they're better than the US. I mean, they're, if on skill alone, I think they're still in the top six in the world, and they didn't play like a top six team in this World Cup.
yeah.
More like a bottom, or maybe like a 12th, 13th best team.
Well,
And all of that just comes down to your mentality and your conditioning and those type of things. And again, I know a lot of Pakistanis might not like to hear this, but you look at someone like Afghanistan, right? They are evolving their game. Yes, it's a bit ironic because their style of play is very Babar and Rizwan esque in a way, but they've got the bowling to back it up.
yeah.
And eventually, you saw in the semi final when that approach fails, how bad it can go. And for them, it's not the same scale, right? The bar is not the same. For them to qualify for the semi final was an overachievement. For Pakistan, making the semi finals would have been
Expected.
expectation, right? So for them, it really didn't matter what happened to them in the semi final. They'll still, get a hero's welcome and all of that. But it's just to see how their game has evolved so much over time. We just haven't seen that in Pakistan, where whether it's in the batting approach or in the bowling, there's just no plan or thinking, no understanding. You just never know what you're going to get from Shine. He's just thinking again, first ball, he's going to go for that in swinging delivery, and trying to get his stats up for taking a wicket in the first over. That just doesn't work anymore. Yes, it worked against Ireland, but it's not going to work against everyone anymore.
Yeah, and
So it's just, it all comes down to just having a sit down and having that understanding and thought process.
look, this
And
isn't the first time that Pakistan has fallen behind. Pakistan always falls behind. Whenever there are mega trends in cricket, Pakistan falls behind. In the late 90s, John T. Rhodes, post John T. Rhodes, when fielding became a much more important part of cricket than previously. Previously, it was fielding, that for the sake of fielding. Then people understood the importance and how it can actually be the difference between winning and losing. Pakistan were found out on the wrong side of that, right? It was only after we dropped all our key players in '03, and all your big players who talk a lot about fielding when they're commentators, they're the ones who inculcated this culture of not prioritizing fielding and your performance. If you're a superstar, who cares if you let a boundary slip or drop a catch?
Yeah.
You'll make it up in your bowling or your batting. It's rubbish mentality. You got found out and you lost and you crashed out in the group stages in '03. Number one. Number two, then, when the game in ODI, and you see this the most in limited overs cricket for obvious reasons, but in ODI cricket, when suddenly post 2011, there was a big shift towards, bigger scores. So, with 300 was par, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly the lines between your middle and lower order was starting to get quite blurred. You needed people who could hit
Yeah.
sixes from number four down, really. Pakistan were found out. We just had the good old Shahid Afridi at number seven, who was a hit and miss.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
this day, we haven't found someone, right? We have always been behind the eight ball. It only takes a crashing like this, to crash out of a group stage tournament for us to wake up and realize. And let's hope that does happen. You know, the last time India won a T20 World Cup, we won the next one to give people some sort of hope. But I'm not going to
Living.
go into. I'm not going into this. So, पहले भी यही हुआ था. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. I think it'll be a miracle if that happens. But anyways, look. So we've been behind,
Yeah.
and we need to start from the bottom up. And I actually think it's not just a squad thing. I think it's throughout domestic cricket. You need
Yeah.
more. You need more mental grooming. It's almost as if it's like a conditioning course that everybody need, high performance conditioning, learning under pressure,
Yeah.
that people need to, courses that people need to do when they're playing domestic cricket.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the next thing on my
Yeah.
on my
Charge sheet.
list. Chart sheet. I'm just pulling it out. The next one, and this one is, look, this one is probably going to be the most explosive one, but I think you need a rethink of your strategy across three formats. Okay, and you need to drop players who are not performing. Okay, the idea that they are the best that we have does not fly, because you have 2 years till the next T20 World Cup. You
Yeah.
need to use that time to find players. I mean, you can't convince me that in a country of 300 million people, we can't find players or hitters better than Iftikhar or leggies better than Shadab Khan. I mean, there's one in the ranks, Abrar, who may not be the answer, but you still have to try him, right?
There's still
You have
such a mystery that they've kept him as a
I mean, the
mystery
whole
throughout the
mystery is,
tournament.
I mean, they're going to unleash him in what, 2027 ODI World Cup in his, like, when he's like, God knows how old. But like, look, I think it's a bit silly. It's really silly that you aren't being
Yeah.
proactive, and you need to drop your players, right? So the players I drop, Iftikhar Ahmed, I think that's it. I'm sorry, Iftikhar, but your time is up, and he just doesn't have the ability to do it. I don't think he's ever won many games for Pakistan, and I think we need to look beyond him. And the biggest name that I'm going to mention here is Shadab Khan. And this
Yeah.
one has really, really been a real mystery. Speaking of mysteries, here was a bowler who was instrumental in ODI cricket in 2017, 2019 also. He did well in that World Cup
Yeah.
from time to time. He won us important games. Suddenly, that form
2021, he
just
was pretty decent.
21, he was decent, but I accept that T20 cricket, it's easier to have inflated things. But yes, 21, he was decent. 22, he was decent. There was a time when we thought after Rashid Khan, he's your best bowling all rounder, spinning all rounder. But I mean, it's been a fall from grace. And that's simply because and this does tend to happen when players, again, haven't evolved. I think batters have seen that they don't need to take too many risks against him because he will always bowl a bad ball.
Yeah.
If you look at his numbers in first class cricket, I'm sorry to say he hasn't really played since he
Yeah.
became a regular in Pakistan, in the Pakistan jersey. And you can see that ends up resulting in poor performances. Right, he
Yeah.
needs to go back to first class cricket. I'm not saying the door is closed on him. Right, I know he's an excellent fielder. I know, but he needs to take his his game seriously. Okay, and whether it's his pursuit of being an all-rounder that's compromised his bowling, in which case a very simple instruction to him, which is we need you more as a bowler than we do as an all-rounder.
Yeah.
100%. We are lacking in spinners like nobody's business, and we need him to go back to focusing on his core suit and only then
Yeah.
complementing it with his batting. Right? He has the ability, and only once he proves himself repeatedly in domestic tournaments and in like first class cricket in particular, can he be given a
Well,
chance again in national contention. He even was good in Test, I remember briefly.
yeah. I mean, I guess the only counter counter to that is he was the player of the tournament in the PSL that just finished a couple of months before the World Cup, right? So from his point of view, or from the selectionist point of view, they're like, well, I mean, yeah, this guy had a poor 23 ODI World Cup, but he was just man of the tournament in your marquee T20 event. What do we do? Not play him? So that's the only counter argument. But yes, his performances have been awful. And I think over the course of this tournament, we've realized that PSL performances should not be the benchmark in any case.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
so look, I think, yeah, I do agree. I think Shadab Khan needs to be rested, if not dropped. But the other question is then who do you play? Do you go with five specialists or like six specialist batters and five bowlers? They need to find a way to find that balance. But to be honest, I don't mind if they go with the South Africa model as well if they have to weaken the batting a little bit. But if that means that you've got someone who's neither here nor there, he's not doing it with the bat or the ball. So you'd rather have someone who's at least good in one suit.
Yeah,
So
look,
so
I think obviously, when you say it like that, rationally it makes sense to do that. But I guess
yeah,
sometimes you just have to see how much better that specialist is in that suit that he is specialist in
yeah,
versus somebody who offers a little more. So I think we need to develop a pace bowling all rounder. I think Pakistan's woes are ever since Razak and Azhar Mahmood even, you haven't found a pace bowling all rounder that gives you that balance.
yeah,
So because Pakistan is a team that needs, I think, three fast bowlers and specialist fast bowlers. You would like to
yeah.
have a fourth option, and if you're not getting a spinning all rounder, I think Imad Wasim's done. I think Mohammad Nawaz is done. Shadab Khan, I think, needs to go back. You need to give Abrar Ahmed a chance, right? Which means you probably need a pace bowling all rounder, and I think Ahmed Jamal has to be someone you need to try. Now, I'm fully aware that his county stats aren't very good. In fact, I think he's benched from the county team that he plays in from time to time. So he hasn't been able to replicate his T20 success, sorry, his test success. Some people may have started saying it was beginner's luck. But whatever it is, you need to give him a fair run. Because
Yeah.
either you find someone else in the meantime whilst you give him a fair run, or you just fully back him to the hilt. Because
Fahim
it's better
Ashraf.
than yeah, look, I mean, look at Fahim Ashraf. The guy got so many chances, right? You need to give, and maybe Ahmed Jamal will click if you give him those chances, right? I mean, I think the reason why he hasn't succeeded much is, and it comes on to my next point, which is a good segue, is clarity of roles. Clarity
Yeah,
of roles is so important, okay? And once you make a decision, you have to stick by it, right?
yeah,
So for me, for example, Fakhar Zaman, right? Should he be opening? I think so. Personally,
yeah,
if you ask me, he needs to make the most of power play. I know he's now your best hitter of spin, which is why they have demoted him from opening to three and from three to four. But I think it's too late for him. You make him open and you say, you know what, Fakhar, we have prioritized the wants of others in the team over yours. Now you get to choose. Okay, no more excuses. You haven't really performed to the best of your ability, but you are still the person with our best chance of coming to 2024. So you open, and that's your role. Ahmed Jamal, you're our number seven. You are the glue that holds the batting and bowling together. Okay, we're not expecting you to get a 5 wicket haul. We're not expecting you to get like 100 or anything like that. We're expecting you to make valuable runs and at a fast rate, right?
yeah,
It's about those key 20s and 30s. It's almost like an Aksar Patel for that matter, and promoting you up the order here and there. So you have to give him that role, okay,
yeah,
both with bat and ball. and then you've got the middle order. So whatever it is, you can't judge players when you constantly change the roles that you give them. I mean, it's absurd. Like, look at Australia. Everybody has a role, right? I mean, you can close your eyes and just count on your fingers how many players are in consideration for each role. Not more than three.
Yeah.
Whereas here, we have a whole lineup who can be openers. Our whole batting lineup from 1 to 7 has opened. I mean, this doesn't help anybody because one,
Yeah.
it creates grievances because people aren't getting their preferred slots and they
Yeah.
feel that they're making up the numbers.
Yeah. And look, I think just again, an extreme example to give, but we have to look at the best, right? And that's India. And again, we said this as well before the World Cup. Look at the squad, how many options they had as openers, but they went with their tried and tested and they backed them. But they had a system that like we're only going to pick the specialists that play in their position. Yes, they move punt around a little bit, but he still plays the top order in the IPL. But they didn't move around and put in Sanju Samson at 4 or 5 or put in other players just to get them into the squad or to
Yeah.
get them into the starting 11. Shivam Dubey, for all his failings, they've stuck to him. He performed. He came good in the final when it really mattered because they backed him. And
For a
again,
role. For a role.
with but again, similar to Tim David, I guess, with Australia, where because the quality around him is so good, he can afford to fail, and he's there for that 1 in 5, where he will come good and he'll win you the game, right? And that's his role on the team. But then you need to have people around you who are that good who can win you the games 3 of the 5
Even
times, if not
Tristan
4 of the 5 times.
Stubbs.
Yeah. Or I mean, South Africa is different because they've got Stubbs, Klassen, and Miller who can do that role on any given day. But but that's again that's the issue, right? Where you just have these roles where if the car goes from well now he's like your finisher. I mean, he's finished Pakistan cricket, but that's a different story. um,
Oh, wow.
but you just keep changing these roles again. Rizwan again, he's gone from anchor to aggressor and to two anchors. Time you comes in when you have different players coming in the team, your role keeps changing. If Saimur comes in, Rizwan is the anchor. It doesn't really make sense. So yeah, I agree. There needs to be a lot more consistency of thought and approach. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to execution as well, right? And the execution has been so awful. Um, and also, to be honest, I think again, to make a rather basic point, they should make all these changes and kind of give the others a go. But I think somebody also needs to have a press conference or kind of change the expectation from us, the fans, and the media. Like, look, this is the decision we've made. This is the decision we made. This is the direction we're trying to go into. This is the brand of cricket we want to play. So we might fail. We might lose again to Zimbabwe or whatever. But this is what we want to do for the next 3 years. So we need to back this team, regardless of how it goes. And
Yeah.
if they go in with that approach, then I don't think people would take it that hard. When they keep saying, "Oh, we're still this good and we're that good," and you're
The
over
best team in the world,
celebrating.
according to Mohsin Naqvi, after beating Ireland. Um,
Exactly. And you're over celebrating PSL wins and all of that stuff. I mean, then obviously it doesn't really add up.
yeah. Um,
Um,
Look, the last time this happened was when Mickey Arthur went back in 2016, where he used to have very detailed press conferences. Look, you're not gonna. I can't change the ODI team overnight, right? I can't change the fitness culture overnight, but I'm doing my best, and I'll take you on the journey with me, right?
yeah.
And people didn't for a year, 2016 to 2017, until we won that Champions Trophy, we knew we were going to lose to England in the ODI series, but our expectations were calibrated. We were happy we at least won that last game, right? And I
Yeah.
know that sounds a bit sad, but you have to, again, it only sounds sad to us Pakistani fans because we have a big ego. But we have to realize that this is a process. We want unlearning bad habits takes many
Yeah.
years. Okay. And the biggest bad habit of all time is fitness and fielding, right? Both are intertwined, right? Which is probably the next and most important part. Our fitness standards are really like piss poor, right? And I have to say, like, I'm not going to go into what Mohammed Hafiz was saying about this person is to blame, that person is to blame, and all that. I don't know
Or
what
people
the right.
making trips to certain food carts in New York.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a clear example of people who don't care. And you might say, "Oh, but it's the team management's fault. They should have let him." I mean, come on, you are your own like you are responsible for yourself. Okay, like you need to take personal ownership and accountability. Like people can't spoon feed you, no pun intended, but and like literally tell you what to do, what's professional, what's not. That's your
Yeah.
role. And the
Again,
same thing.
it's yes, these things probably are even more exaggerated when the team doesn't perform, right? But you've not seen any of the other teams clips of them going out and having a whatever, a rather unhealthy meal outdoors. Let me put it politely. That just doesn't happen, right? This is the only team, and it obviously it gets even worse when you're caught in the act and you're losing the next game. It happened in 2019 with Safraz and Koi got caught in Manchester or somewhere having burgers. Um, you know, so these things will happen, and there's just no sense of
Yeah,
professionalism and owner.
but
Back to the point where they just don't take responsibility, right?
yeah,
And again, you
coming
can't
back to
compare
this.
to. I'm not asking them to follow like a Virat Kohli type diet, whatever. Everything is got to be measured to the gram. But I mean, you're a professional sports person.
Yeah,
You need to,
and
yeah,
most importantly, I think, look, fitness. If you're not fit, you don't make it into the team. End of.
yeah,
The minute you put that condition down, you'll be surprised to see how many people will show
yeah.
up to the gym the next day, right?
Agreed.
Because
Agreed.
you create exceptions, people think
Yeah,
that, oh, I'm good enough to be the exception as well. Oh,
yeah,
if it happened with him, why can't it happen with me? And then
yeah,
you're in a difficult position and be like, okay, fine, yes, you can come in as well.
yeah,
If you set a line that you are not willing to cross, everybody is going to get in line because everybody
yeah.
wants to play, right? And they don't want to play, then their intentions are not in the right place. But
Agreed.
these things are all very basic, right? That I'm sure anybody can come, even a 6-year-old can say, these are rights and wrongs, right?
Yeah,
But it's sad that we have to say it and air all this, at
yeah,
the risk of sounding really basic, because unfortunately we can't get the basics right. You talked about this whole like eating fine fast food joint. Even Safraz Ahmed was caught doing that in
yeah,
2019. Remember the India game? For some
yeah,
reason,
yeah,
we still
exactly.
don't learn our lessons. We, but never mind. Look, I think ultimately in every team, you need to look at tests, ODIs, T20s a bit separately.
Yeah,
Okay, and I'm going to try and make a more technical point, which is I think your T20 team should be a team of specialists. Okay, you need to start from scratch. If that
yeah,
means you forego the next T20 World Cup and be like, look, if we make it to a semi, it's a bonus. If we win it, it's a bonus. But we have to just get the process right. I don't mind. But you need
yeah,
to start thinking of the ODI format as closer to tests or firmly in the middle, as opposed to, oh, here you have T20 players who can be ODI players, and here you have ODI players who can be T20 players. Absolutely not. It doesn't work either way. Okay.
yeah.
Yes, there are exceptions. You'll point out David Warner, but these are
These are
exceptions.
world class
These
players.
are talents of generations. Like, talents that will come once, in a
Yeah,
spectator's lifetime. Come on. With
yeah,
the more typical talent, you
yeah.
won't have that level of, especially with
I
the
mean, there's
batting.
yeah, Kohli,
It's
Sharma,
not.
Warner. I mean, exclude them from this list. Maybe Quinton de
Exactly.
Kock as well to a
Exclude them.
certain way.
Exclude them for a second,
Yeah,
right? Well, like think of bowling. Like I personally think Mir Hamza, who's done really well in tests, should be given a go in one day cricket. Why?
I agree.
Because he can bowl 10 over spells.
Yeah,
Not 10 over spells, but longer spells of like 3-4 overs that then will amount to 10 overs altogether, right? Rather than these Haris Raufs and all these players who can still be in contention, but you have to penalize them whenever they're unable to be fully consistent across the
yeah,
10 overs. And I think
true.
you need to look at the test crop of talent that you have here. Even if it's a little limited, you need to look at them a little more in your ODI cricket from a bowling perspective. And from a batting perspective, you need people who can get both gears in.
Yeah,
Whereas T20, as I said, one anchor only, and the rest need to be players who can go out from ball one, right, and start
yeah,
hitting. And that is a massive change in mental
yeah,
approach and intent, right? The whole idea that yes, you may be 30 for 3, just like India were in the final, but you need to back your middle and lower order to then take you from 30 to 3 to 110 for 4, right? Because wickets are overrated, right? As we've
yeah,
said again and again, 30 for 3 isn't as bad as it sounds. We have grown up in ODI cricket,
yeah,
terms. 30 for
yeah.
3 is actually, look. you only have 120 balls, so you might as well make it
Exactly.
count.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and just lastly, before we finish up, is a slightly linked point around, you mentioned domestic cricket and bringing players on. This random series that the Pakistan A or the Pakistan Shaheen's team has in Darwin, Australia
Darwin,
against Bangladesh. I don't
eh?
know whether there's some people from the management committee, they haven't been to Australia, or they want to get an Australian visa or something, that decide to plan this random
I
trip
mean,
to Australia. I mean, this goes back to the same point around culture and stuff. They have a test series against Bangladesh in Bangladesh, right?
In Bangladesh, for God's sake. I mean, and you're playing in Australian conditions against a team that's probably as bad as you in those conditions, and you're paying close to 20 lakhs Pakistani rupees per person, per ticket, to go all the way to Darwin, right? I mean, to all our international, that, that equates to more than £1,000, right? For
Yeah.
what? I mean, and you have this massive support staff. You see the name of people, or you have conditioning coach. Please tell me, what is a conditioning coach? I sorry, I'm a bit confused here. Like all these people who are just getting ready for their summer holiday, and I think it's ridiculous. I mean, who's making these decisions? It's absolutely baffling. You know?
Yeah, I mean, if you at least if you're playing like against some state level teams, something that maybe it makes sense to give them, or against Australia, maybe Australia A, maybe Australia B, or something like that, right? Uh, but it's really weird, especially this time of the year as well. It's not the Australian winters. I don't know what their thinking was. I mean, I know Pakistan has a white ball series in Australia coming up in November, but it just doesn't make any sense. But it goes back to the whole thing around planning and thinking around it, and it just shows that the problems are not just within the main Pakistan team, the 15 or the 17 or 20, if you include the support staff. It's a cultural thing across Pakistan cricket as a whole. Which is
Yeah.
why in the beginning I said the problem that is Pakistan cricket, not the problems with Pakistan cricket.
Yeah, I mean, that's and notice, please notice, to everyone watching, we haven't mentioned the coaches once, which is probably not
What can you
usual,
say?
right? No, no, but many people think coaches will solve the problem. They won't. There's nothing the only thing the coach can do,
Yeah,
perhaps, is to get this rotation policy sorted.
yeah,
Pakistan, every time it goes into this rotation program before a big tournament, we end up more confused. The reason is, let me make it very simple. Rotation policies only work for teams that already have their first 11 sorted with roles clearly
yeah,
marked. And it is only when one or two positions are still up for grabs that you would
yeah,
embark on a bit of a rotation policy, but the roles are clearly set out. But for a
yeah,
team like Pakistan, which going into this tournament, the roles were absolutely not set out, rotation was the last thing you wanted. And also for a
exactly.
team that has forgotten the habit of winning, rotation policy makes even less
Yeah,
sense, right?
agreed.
Yeah, like it's not like in Australia who won the 8 out of their last 10 games, right? It's not. It's Pakistan who barely won anything. Winning is a habit, and you can't understate the importance of getting back in that habit, and that's why it just makes even less sense. But look, um, Zaid, we could sit here all day, right? I mean, a part of me wants to do a part two and talk about all the things we didn't talk about, right? And there are a few important things in my head, like a players' association for the players. I know we didn't talk about it, it's a bit
Yeah,
technical, but if you think about mental conditioning and security for players, you think
yeah,
you need players' associations. You need that because groupings have only resulted because I think some players are represented by this organization, whereas others are
yeah,
unrepresented. So there's disparity of conditions and terms, contractual terms, etc. That creates insecurity, that creates bad feelings. Groupings, you
yeah.
need players associations. It's been 20 years since people have been saying that. We're one of the only countries in the world that don't have players associations for their top sports. um,
Yeah. Anyways, that's a debate for another day.
yes, yes.
All right. Well, I think we've said quite a lot in the past hour or so, pretty much. We've tried to come up with some solutions. I hope you agree. If you don't, then let us know in the comments what you think should be the right solution, or where should Pakistan cricket go from here. Simple as that. All right. Thank you for watching, and we'll come
Very
up with.
positively, we can end by saying there's only one way, and that way is up. Thank you, Zaid.
Thank you.